The air in Umwagu was thick with the scent of roasting yam and freshly tapped palm wine, but suddenly, a gust of wind carried something far more powerful. A choking stench spread through the marketplace like wildfire. Women dropped their baskets of vegetables, traders covered their noses with their wrappers, and children screamed as they scattered in all directions. "Ack! She is coming!" a young boy cried, dashing into a nearby hut. The marketplace emptied within moments, leaving behind only a few brave souls peeking from their hiding places. Slowly, she emerged, the reason for the chaos. Princess Olamma. She walked heavily, her round, sweat-covered body wrapped in expensive aquite cloth. Her thick arms swung as she struggled to move, her breath labored. But it was not her size that sent people fleeing. It was the overpowering, stomach-turning stench that clung to her like a second skin. Olamma sighed as she saw the empty market stalls. She had only wanted to take a walk. Princess Olamma was no ordinary woman. She was huge, her body as wide as two women put together. Her arms and legs jiggled with every step she took, her belly folding into itself in layers of flesh. The midday sun made her sweat, and her thick, oily skin glistened. Her father, King Ezebiro, had never denied her anything. She ate the best meals: goat meat pepper soup, fufu with oha soup, fried plantains with thick palm oil sauce. Every day, servants brought her platters of food, and she ate until she could no longer move. But it was not just her weight that made her life miserable. It was the smell. The scent was something unnatural, thick, heavy, and sour. It clung to her no matter how much she bathed. She had tried everything: scrubbing her skin with camwood, rubbing herself with shea butter mixed with herbs, soaking in streams for hours. Nothing worked. The smell remained. Some whispered that Olamma's stench was not ordinary. It was a curse. Long ago, her father, King Ezebiro, had wronged the gods. Some said he had refused to sacrifice a white ram to Amadioha, the god of thunder. Others claimed he had stolen land from a poor widow, causing her to place a deadly curse on his first daughter. Whatever the truth was, one thing remained. Olamma was the only child of the king, yet no suitor came for her hand. Many elders believed the gods had made her stink so that no man would ever love her. Others thought the spirits of the river had turned her flesh rotten from within. The king refused to believe in curses. He spent bags of cowries on healers, medicine men, and even the best scent makers from the distant lands of Nri and Arachukwu. They made powders, oils, and perfumes, but nothing could remove the smell. Deep down, Olamma wondered if the rumors were true. Maybe she was cursed. Maybe she would be alone forever. "Cover your nose. The stinking princess is coming." The words rang in her ears as she walked past the villagers. Women turned away, fanning the air. Young men spat on the ground, laughing. Even the palace guards held their breath when she passed. At the stream, the other girls of the village refused to fetch water when she was near. "If her sweat touches the water, even the fishes will die," one of them said, and the others burst into laughter. At the palace, even the servants feared her. They avoided standing too close. When they brought her food, they left the tray at the door and ran away before she opened it. She had no friends. No one wanted to sit near her, talk to her, or even touch her. Olamma told herself she was used to it. But deep inside, the loneliness burned like hot coal. Olamma spent most of her days inside the grand palace of Umwagu, watching life pass by from the carved wooden windows of her chamber. She watched the village girls dancing under the moonlight, their laughter ringing like bells. She watched young men wrestling in the village square, showing their strength to impress the maidens. She watched lovers holding hands, whispering sweet words under the shade of the great Irako tree. And she envied them. Her mother, Queen Ifyinanya, tried to console her. "One day, my daughter, someone will love you for who you are," she would say, stroking Olamma's chubby fingers. But Olamma knew better. She was the cursed princess, the girl whose smell sent warriors running, the girl who could clear a whole marketplace with her scent. Love. That was something she could only dream about. The palace of Umwagu was vast, its red mud walls standing high against the sky, its courtyards filled with carved totems of ancestors. The servants moved in hushed tones, their bare feet making no sound as they walked across the smooth clay floors. But the silence was different when it came to Princess Olamma. She was a ghost in her own home. The maids who were supposed to care for her did their work quickly and left as soon as they could. They avoided eye contact, their faces tight with suppressed discomfort. Whenever she entered a room, the chatter among the palace workers would fade into whispers, and some would find excuses to leave. Even the royal guards, strong men who were trained to face danger without fear, shifted uncomfortably in her presence. They inhaled deeply before she got too close, then exhaled in relief when she passed. Olamma noticed everything. She noticed how the palace cooks placed her food far away from their noses as they brought it in. She noticed how the queen's attendants avoided brushing her skin when dressing her in her fine, embroidered wrappers. She noticed how, despite being the only child of the king, she lived in a palace where no one wanted to be near her. She was a princess, yet she had no friends. When night fell, Olamma sat by the large window of her chamber, looking up at the sky. The moon was always there, glowing softly, watching over the land. It was her only companion. "Great moon," she whispered, her voice thick with sadness. "Is there anyone in this world who will love me?" The moon, in all its silver beauty, had no answer for her. She sighed and rested her chin on her hands. Every day, she longed for companionship, for laughter, for someone who would see her as more than just the princess with the unbearable stench. She imagined what it would feel like to walk through the village without people running away. To sit with the other girls by the stream, giggling as they washed their wrappers. But she knew those were foolish dreams. She was different, cursed, and the world had already decided that she was unworthy of love. King Ezebiro and Queen Ifunanya were troubled. Their daughter, their only child, was suffering, and they could do nothing about it. The queen spent sleepless nights pacing in her chamber, thinking of new remedies, new priests, new healers they could consult. She had tried everything: perfumed oils from the traders of Nri, cleansing rituals from the elders of the land, even powerful charms from a mysterious dibia deep in the forest. Nothing worked. King Ezebiro, a man known for his strength and wisdom, sat in his obi, staring at the flames of his burning torch, deep in thought. His ancestors had blessed him with wealth and power, but what good were those if he could not help his daughter? "This is not ordinary," he muttered one night to his trusted chief, Ichio Keke. "What kind of ailment refuses to leave even after all we have done?" Ichio Keke sighed. "My king, the people are beginning to speak. They say the gods have punished our land through her." The king's jaw tightened. He would not accept that. His daughter was not a curse. And yet, deep inside, fear gripped his heart. Umwagu was a village of traditions, and traditions demanded that anything unnatural be dealt with. The elders gathered in hushed meetings, discussing Olamma's condition. Some believed she should be sent away to live in isolation, while others argued that she should be locked up within the palace walls forever. "What if her smell brings misfortune upon our children?" one woman asked, her face wrinkled with concern. "She is the princess, but what use is a princess that no man will ever marry?" another villager whispered. "Her stench alone can drive away spirits," someone else added. The murmur spread like harmattan fire, reaching even the ears of the palace. Servants, palace guards, and even the villagers' children repeated the words they had overheard. And though Olamma pretended not to hear, their words echoed in her heart. Loneliness sat in Olamma's chest like a heavy stone. She was only 18, but she felt older than the hills that surrounded Umwagu. She had never been courted, never received love letters woven in palm fronds like the other girls did, never had a suitor come to kneel before her father, offering gifts of coconuts and wine. Love was something she had only read about in folktales. Stories of maidens so beautiful that warriors fought to win their hearts. Stories of women so desirable that kings offered half their kingdoms just to have them. But no one told stories about a fat, stinking princess. No one dreamed of loving someone like her. Olamma pressed her hands against her chest, as if trying to squeeze out the ache inside. She wanted love, but love would never want her. Obinna was not like the other men in Umwagu. He was strong, his back broad from years of carrying heavy game through the forest. His hands were rough from wielding his bow and machete, his skin darkened by the sun. But despite his strength, his heart was soft. He was a hunter, one of the best in the village, yet he was also the poorest. His father had died when he was young, leaving him to care for his sick mother. He had no farmland, no cattle, and no rich uncles to give him wealth. His only possessions were his bow, his arrows, and the worn-out hut he shared with his mother. But Obinna did not complain. He was a man of few words but deep thoughts. Where others mocked, he observed. Where others feared, he showed courage. And where others ran from Olamma, he stood still. It happened one afternoon when Obinna had returned from hunting. He had just entered the village square, carrying a bushmeat slung over his shoulder, when he heard the familiar sound of laughter, sharp, cruel, mocking. He turned and saw them, a group of children hurling insults at a lone figure near the palace gates. Olamma. She stood there, her chubby hands gripping her wrapper tightly. Her face lowered as the children clutched their noses and ran around her, chanting songs of mockery. Princess of smell. Princess of flies. Her scent is worse than a dead goat. Obinna frowned. He had heard the stories of the fat, cursed princess whose stench could make even warriors flee. He had seen people avoid her, even when she merely passed by. But he had never stood this close to her before. He expected the smell to hit him like a storm. But instead, all he saw was a young woman, alone, humiliated, her eyes filled with pain. She did not fight back. She simply turned and walked away, her shoulders hunched. Obinna's grip tightened around his bow. There was something about the way she walked, heavy not just from her weight, but from the burden of shame she carried. Something in his chest tightened, and for the first time he wanted to know more. Days passed, but the image of Olamma did not leave Obinna's mind. Why did the villagers treat her that way? Was she really cursed? Or had they simply decided she was not worthy of love? Obinna had never cared for gossip, and he had never judged people by what others said. He preferred to see with his own eyes, to listen with his own ears. One evening as he walked past the palace, he noticed her again, this time sitting under a large udala tree, staring at the ground. She was alone as always. Obinna hesitated, then made a decision. He walked towards her. Olamma did not notice him at first. She was lost in thought, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. But then a shadow fell over her. She looked up sharply, expecting to see another person coming to mock her. But instead she saw a tall man, his dark eyes studying her with curiosity. Then, "Good evening, princess," he said. Olamma blinked. No one ever greeted her. No one ever came close enough. But here was this man standing right before her, his face calm, his body relaxed. She opened her mouth but found no words. Obinna tilted his head slightly. "You look lonely." Olamma's heart skipped. She lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say. No one had ever cared to ask her that before. "Why are you here?" she finally whispered. Obinna shrugged. "Why not?" His words were simple, but they held a weight she did not understand. For the first time in a long time someone was speaking to her, not because they had to, not because they wanted something from her, but because they simply wanted to. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel invisible. From that evening things changed. Obinna returned the next day, and the day after that. Each time, he found Olamma in the same spot, beneath the udala tree, her face lighting up in surprise at his arrival. They talked at first only about small things. The weather, the village market, the latest rumors about a distant warlord. Then, as the days passed, the conversations grew deeper. Obinna told her about his hunting trips, about the thick forests where he spent his days, about the thrill of tracking an animal through the wild. Olamma, in turn, told him about the palace, about the loneliness, about the endless whispers of the servants. Slowly, something strange began to happen. Olamma started to laugh. Not the laughter of mockery, not the laughter she heard from others, but real, genuine laughter. Obinna would say something amusing, and she would chuckle, covering her mouth with her hands as if afraid to let the sound escape. And Obinna would watch her, his lips curving into a smile, pleased that he could make her forget her sorrow, if only for a moment. As the days turned to weeks, they grew closer. Their meetings became their little secret, something they both looked forward to. For Olamma, it was the first time in her life that someone treated her as a person, not a curse. For Obinna, it was the first time he had ever been drawn to someone for reasons beyond what others could see. And as they sat beneath the Udala tree, lost in conversation, neither of them realized that something deeper was beginning to grow between them. Something neither of them expected. Something called love. For the first time in her life, Olamma felt something strange, hope. Obinna's presence in her life had become like the soft rays of the early morning sun, gentle yet warming. He did not flinch when she spoke. He did not clutch his nose or back away. He sat with her, listened to her, and most importantly, he saw her. She had spent years hiding, believing that she was unworthy of love, that her existence was a punishment to herself and to those around her. But now this one man was changing everything. Each day, when she heard his footsteps approaching the Udala tree, her heart would beat a little faster. She would smooth her wrapper, adjust the beads on her hair, and try, just for a moment, to feel like a woman and not a curse. Maybe, just maybe, she was not as invisible as she thought. Obinna had always been different from the other men in Umwagu. Where others followed the crowd, he walked his own path. Where others saw ugliness, he searched for beauty. He had spent years listening to the villagers mock the princess, yet when he looked at her, he saw something they did not. He saw a woman who had been caged all her life, longing for freedom, aching for love. It was not just sympathy that brought him back to her every evening. It was admiration. She was witty, sharper than many women he had met. She had a kind heart. Despite being treated with cruelty, she never spoke ill of others. And, perhaps most importantly, she understood loneliness just as he did. The more they talked, the more he realized that Olamma was not a creature to be pitied. She was a soul waiting to be set free. And Obinna wanted to be the man to do that. Obinna was not a rich man. He had no fine coral beads, no expensive cloth, no gold to gift her. But love, he believed, was not measured in riches. It was found in the little things. So he brought her small gifts, things that reminded him of her. A wildflower he picked on his way from the forest, delicate but strong like her. A small wooden carving of a tortoise, symbolizing wisdom and patience, things she had in abundance. And stories. Oh, the stories. He told her about the deep forests, about the strange sounds of animals at night, about the stars that burned brightest when the world was silent. He told her about the village beyond the palace walls, the festivals, the dances, the laughter. And each time he did, he saw something change in her eyes. A hunger, a longing, a flicker of joy. The villagers noticed. At first they whispered, then they laughed. The mad hunter, they called him. The one who speaks to the princess of flies. Obinna ignored them. But Olamma heard. She saw the way people pointed at them when she walked by. She saw the palace guards sneering behind her back. She saw the disgust in their eyes. And for the first time since she met Obinna, fear crept into her heart. What if they turn against you? She asked one evening, her voice heavy with worry. What if they drive you away because of me? Obinna only smiled. Let them talk. They do not know what I see. But Olamma was not convinced. She had spent her life being rejected. The thought of dragging Obinna into her shame was unbearable. And yet, she could not bring herself to push him away. It happened on a night when the moon was high, casting a soft silver glow over the land. Olamma and Obinna sat beneath the Udala tree, their shoulders almost touching. The night was still, save for the occasional chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Obinna took a deep breath. "I love you, Olamma," he said. The words were simple, yet they struck her like lightning. She turned sharply, her eyes wide, her heart pounding. "You what?" "I love you," he repeated, his voice steady. "Not because I pity you. Not because I want something from you. I love you because you are Olamma." Olamma's lips parted, but no words came out. No one, not even her parents, had ever told her such words. She had dreamed of hearing them, but never in her wildest thoughts did she believe they would be spoken to her. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to say anything now," Obinna continued, his fingers brushing against hers. "I just want you to know that when I see you, I do not see a curse. I see a woman. A beautiful, strong woman." For the first time in her life, Olamma did not feel like a burden. She felt wanted. She felt loved. And though fear still lingered in her heart, for the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a future where she was not alone. It began as a whisper. At first, the villagers thought it was an ordinary fever, the kind that came with a change of seasons. But soon, the sickness spread like harmattan fire. Men who had once been strong hunters collapsed in the streets. Women clutched their stomachs in pain. Children shivered, their bodies drenched in sweat. The healers tried everything. Herbs, incantations, sacrifices, but nothing worked. The illness did not discriminate. Struck the young, the old, the rich, the poor. It had no name, but the villagers soon called it Oguanwu, the curse of death. And death came swiftly. People ran from their sick neighbors, terrified of catching the disease. Families locked their doors, refusing to let even their own blood inside. Markets emptied, streets grew silent, and the once lively sound of children playing was replaced by wails of grief. King Ezebiro summoned the village elders and the chief priest. "What do we do?" the king asked, his voice heavy with worry. The chief priest, an old man with deep wrinkles carved into his face, shook his head. "The gods are angry, my king. We must keep the sick away from the healthy." And so, the king gave the order. Everyone must remain indoors. The sick were to be left alone in their homes. No one was to gather. No one was to visit another's compound. A village that once thrived on togetherness became a place of isolation. Even the air felt cursed. Olamma sat by her window, staring at the empty streets below. For days she had not seen Obinna. She missed him, more than she thought possible. Before, loneliness had been her normal. But now, after knowing what it felt like to be wanted, to be loved, the loneliness felt unbearable. She had tried to sneak out just once, but the palace guards stopped her. "Go back inside, princess," one barked. "The king has ordered it." She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. But what could she do? She did not know if Obinna was safe. She did not know if he was even alive. And it broke her heart. The sickness showed no mercy. One by one, families were wiped out. Some homes became silent tombs, with no one left to mourn the dead. Even the strongest warriors, the ones who had fought off wild beasts and enemy tribes, fell to the disease like weaklings. The royal palace was not spared. Servants collapsed while fetching water. Guards shivered in their posts. The chief cook was found lifeless by the fireplace. Fear clung to every corner of the kingdom. There was no time for proper burials. Bodies were taken to the forests and abandoned. The scent of death hung heavy in the air. And everyone knew. It was only a matter of time before it reached them too. Umwagu was no longer a village. It was a graveyard. People whispered prayers to the gods, begging for mercy. The once busy markets were deserted. The wrestling fields, where young men once tested their strength, were empty. The village square, where women used to gather to grind millet and tell stories, was silent. No one laughed. No one sang. No one dared to dream. Survival was the only thought on everyone's mind. And in the midst of it all, locked away in her palace, Olamma could only think of one thing. Would she ever see Obinna again? The sickness crept into the palace like an uninvited spirit. First it was just a headache. Then her body burned with fever. Her limbs felt like they were being weighed down by unseen hands. She could barely lift herself from her sleeping mat. Sweat drenched her wrappers, yet she shivered like one trapped in Harmattan's grip. When the servants noticed, they ran in fear. No one wanted to be near her. Her father, King Ezebiro, ordered her to be moved into an isolated chamber. Even the royal family was not spared from the village's rules. Alone in the dimly lit room, Olamma lay on the cold mat, staring at the ceiling. So this is how I will die. The villagers had always seen her as a curse. And now maybe the gods had agreed with them. King Ezebiro could not sit still. He sent his messengers to every known healer in the land, from the medicine men of Arachukwu to the powerful seers of Nri. He promised wealth, land, anything, just to save his daughter. Some came with herbs, chanting incantations. Others smeared her body with potions made from crushed leaves, snake venom, and rare forest roots. Nothing worked. Olamma remained in a fevered daze, drifting in and out of consciousness. The palace walls, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed with the sounds of desperate prayers and hushed whispers of death. Queen Ifeanyi sat beside her daughter's sickbed, her heart breaking. Olamma's once plump face was now hollow. Her lips were dry, cracked like the earth in dry season. Her breath came in slow, weak gasps. Tears slipped down the queen's face. She had prayed for a child for years before Olamma was born. Though the gods had given her a daughter different from others, she had loved her fiercely. Now she knelt before the shrine in the palace, lifting her trembling hands to the gods. "Take anything from me, but do not take my child," she pleaded. She placed sacrifices at the feet of the gods, white fowls, kola nuts, jars of palm wine. Ola has suffered enough. Let her live. But the gods remained silent. Obinna sat outside his small hut, staring at the empty road that led to the palace. He had not seen Olamma in days. The rumors had reached him. People said the princess had caught the plague. Some even said she was already dead. His heart ached at the thought. He had fallen in love with Olamma, not because of her beauty, but because of her heart. The way she laughed when he told her stories, the way she always looked at the moon like it held the answers to her sadness. Now he could do nothing but wait. With closed eyes, he whispered a prayer, not to the gods of the land, but to the spirits of the ancestors. Let her survive. Olamma felt the cold embrace of death. Her body was weak. The world around her blurred. She could hear her mother sobbing. She could hear the distant voice of the chief priest telling her father to prepare for the worst. But she was too tired to respond. For the first time in her life she stopped fighting. She let the darkness take her. Would she wake up again? Or was this truly the end? Olamma's breath was shallow, her body drenched in sweat. The fever had drained the life from her, leaving her weak and unresponsive. The queen sat beside her, her eyes swollen from nights without sleep. The village healers had tried everything, herbs, prayers, and rituals, but nothing seemed to work. Desperate, the queen turned to an ancient remedy passed down by the women of her lineage. She ordered the servants to fetch the strongest roots, leaves, and barks from the deepest parts of the forest. It was a secret mixture known only to the royal bloodline. As the fire burned beneath the clay pot, the aroma of bitter herbs filled the palace. The queen crushed dried ginger and yuta seeds, adding them to the boiling mixture. She whispered prayers as she stirred, calling upon the gods of healing. Once ready, the dark, thick liquid was poured into a calabash. 2 guards lifted Olamma into a sitting position while the queen gently pressed the calabash to her daughter's lips. "Drink, my child," she whispered. Olamma's lips barely parted, but the queen did not stop. She poured little by little, forcing the bitter mixture down her throat. She continued this ritual for days, massaging her body with healing oils, washing her with warm herbal water, and making her drink the potion every morning and night. Then one evening Olamma stirred. Her mother, who had been dozing beside her, felt the movement and sat up quickly. Olamma's eyes fluttered open. "Eneni," she whispered weakly. Tears rolled down the queen's face. "The gods have heard me," she cried, calling out to the king and servants. The fever had finally broken. As Olamma's strength slowly returned, something strange began to happen. The servants, who had always worked around her with covered noses, noticed the air around her felt different. No sourness, no unbearable odor. At first, they thought it was their imagination. But as they continued caring for her, it became clear. Olamma no longer smelled. The head servant, Ijeoma, leaned closer to confirm. She gasped. "My queen, the princess's scent. It is gone." The queen's hands trembled as she moved closer. She pressed her nose to Olamma's skin. Nothing. No foulness. Only the sweet smell of the herbal oils she had been using. Tears filled her eyes again. "The gods have rewritten your fate, my daughter." Olamma remained the same. Her body had not changed, her size as it had always been. But something was different. Her skin, once dull and patchy, now glowed like polished bronze under the morning sun. Her face, usually coated in sweat, had a softness to it. Her eyes, no longer burdened by sickness, shone like stars. When she caught her reflection in the brass mirror, she paused. It was still her, the same Olamma. But there was something new in her gaze. Light, quiet confidence. For the first time in her life, Olamma felt beautiful. Not because of how she looked, but because of how she felt inside. The day Olamma stepped outside, the village froze. People who had once covered their noses at her presence now gasped in disbelief. "Is that the same Princess Olamma?" She was still the same princess, her body unchanged, but the foul scent that had once followed her was gone. And in its place was something new. A glow, a presence, a quiet pride. The villagers murmured among themselves, some in awe, others in confusion. How could something they had believed to be a curse suddenly disappear? Even the king's council, who had debated sending her away, stood in silence, unable to comprehend the change. Olamma felt their stares. She had spent her whole life being avoided, mocked for her scent, and rejected. Now they looked at her with curiosity, with wonder. A slow smile crept onto her lips. For the first time, she felt what it was like to be acknowledged. But in all the excitement, she did not notice the one person who was missing. Binna. Would he still see her as the Olamma he had loved? Or was she now just another person in a world that only valued what the eyes could see? The palace courtyard had never been so silent. Every eye remained fixed on Olamma, the princess who once carried an unbearable stench that had made even the bravest warriors turn away. But now she stood before them, radiant. The murmurs that had spread through the crowd earlier had turned into stunned silence. No one could deny what they were seeing. "It is truly her," a young woman muttered, gripping her friend's arm. "Her scent, it's gone," an elder said in disbelief. The king and queen stood proudly by her side, their eyes scanning the faces of the gathered villagers. Olamma lifted her chin, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in her life, she was not being avoided. She was being seen. It was not just the disappearance of her stench that had everyone in awe. It was the way she carried herself. Confidence shone in her eyes, and her skin glowed like the morning sun. The young men who had once avoided her, who had crossed the street to escape her presence, now looked at her with open admiration. "Olamma!" A warrior named Nduka murmured under his breath. "How did we never see this before?" Another man, the son of a wealthy trader, stepped forward slightly, as if drawn to her. "She is no longer just the princess hidden away," he said. "She is a woman." For the first time, Olamma felt the weight of their gazes, not of disgust, but of admiration. It made her heart race in a way she had never known before. Among the crowd, the village women whispered, "She was once an outcast, and now our men cannot stop staring at her." One woman scoffed. "Her scent may be gone, but she is still just Olamma," another added, though there was a hint of bitterness in her voice. The envy in their eyes was unmistakable. Where once they had pitied her, Now they resented the attention she was receiving. But Olamma barely noticed. For the first time she was free. She was wanted. A strange warmth filled Olamma's chest as she absorbed the admiring looks, the hushed whispers. So this is what it felt like, to be desired. For years, she had watched from the palace windows as other girls were admired, chosen, loved. She had accepted that such things were not meant for her. But now, here she was, standing before a crowd that no longer feared her presence. For the first time, she let herself dream of possibilities she had never dared to entertain. In the shadows, away from the growing crowd, Obinna stood still. His hands were clenched at his sides as he watched the unfolding scene. She looked happy. That should have been enough for him. But as he watched young men step closer, their eyes filled with interest, a knot tightened in his chest. He had loved Olamma when no one else had. When the world had turned its back on her, he had stayed. But now the world wanted her too. Would she still remember him? Would she still look at him the same way? As the voices around her grew louder, Olamma turned slightly. Her eyes swept over the crowd, and for a brief moment she seemed to be searching. Obinna held his breath. Would she see him? Would she come to him? Or had he already lost her? The days that followed Olamma's reappearance felt like a dream. The palace courtyard, once quiet, now bustled with men hoping to win her favor. Wealthy traders, noble sons, and even visiting dignitaries sent gifts. Silk wrappers embroidered with gold, delicate coral beads, and perfumes from distant lands. Servants carried in baskets of rare fruits and bowls of the finest soups, all prepared specially for her. Each morning, she woke to more treasures laid at her feet. "This is for you, my princess," a tall warrior said, presenting a spear with a handle carved from rare ebony wood. "A weapon fit for a woman as strong as you." Olamma accepted it with a smile, but her eyes danced toward the next gift. She was learning quickly there was power in being desired. She had never felt this way before. The Olamma of yesterday, the girl whose presence had driven people away, was fading. In her place stood a woman the world wanted. She walked through the palace with her head high, wearing the finest attires the kingdom had ever seen. She spoke with confidence, her laughter ringing through the halls. At feasts, men jostled for a seat near her, eager to hear her speak. The women who had once mocked her now struggled to keep up with her presence. She drank in the admiration, letting it fill the emptiness she had once felt. But as the days passed, something else happened, something she barely noticed. The more Olamma embraced her new life, the more she pushed away the shadows of her old one. She no longer thought of the days she had spent hiding, nor the pain of rejection. And little by little she thought less of Obinna. She still saw him sometimes, always at a distance. He did not try to approach her, and she did not call for him. "Why should I?" she reasoned one evening as she admired her reflection in a polished brass mirror. "I am a princess. I belong here." Obinna had been kind to her when no one else was. But kindness alone was not enough anymore. The king watched everything unfold with great satisfaction. His daughter, once hidden from the world, was now the most sought-after woman in the land. "This is an opportunity," he told the queen, his voice filled with excitement. "A powerful marriage could strengthen our kingdom." The queen hesitated. But should love not guide her choice? The king scoffed. "Love. A princess's duty is greater than love." Soon, envoys from distant lands began arriving, each carrying proposals from noble families. Some spoke of gold, others of land, and a few even offered alliances that could make their kingdom the strongest in the region. The king's heart swelled with pride. His daughter was no longer a burden. She was a gift to be treasured. Obinna knew it was happening even before she did. He had watched as she stepped into the world, glowing and admired. He had seen the way men looked at her, how she smiled at them in return. But worst of all, he had felt the distance grow between them. Once, Olamma would rush to meet him in the quiet corners of the village, eager to share her thoughts. Now, she barely glanced in his direction. The nights felt longer and the days heavier. She is happy, he told himself. That should be enough. But deep inside he knew the truth. She was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Days turned into weeks, and Olamma found herself drifting further from Obinna. At first, she told herself it was unintentional. There were just so many feasts, gatherings, and admirers demanding her time. But deep inside she knew the truth. She no longer saw the need for a poor hunter in her life. What could Obinna offer her now? Before, he had been her only friend. Now, she had an entire kingdom singing her praises. One afternoon, as she walked through the market, she spotted him near the blacksmith's shed. Their eyes met just for a moment. Obinna's face was unreadable, but Olamma quickly turned away, pretending not to see him. She kept walking, her silken wrapper swaying with each step. She did not look back. The change in Olamma had brought an undeniable excitement to the village. Everywhere she went, people whispered about her transformation. The once forgotten princess was now the jewel of the kingdom. Women admired her elegance, and men spoke of her with longing. At festivals, songs were sung in her honor. Dancers moved gracefully under the moonlight, their voices chanting, "Olamma, the pride of our land. The gods have touched her. A beauty beyond compare." The queen watched it all with quiet relief. She had prayed for Olamma's happiness, and now it seemed her daughter had finally found her place in the world. The king, on the other hand, saw an even greater opportunity. If the right suitor came along, their family could rise higher than ever before. Binna had always been strong. He had faced wild animals in the forest, braved storms, and endured hunger. But nothing had prepared him for this kind of pain. Each day, he watched as Olamma laughed with men who had never noticed her before. He saw her accepting their gifts, basking in their admiration. And each time their eyes met, if they met at all, there was nothing left of the girl he had once known. Obinna tried to ignore the aching in his chest, but it grew heavier with each passing moment. One evening, as he sat beneath the great iroko tree outside his hut, he whispered to himself, "Maybe it is time to leave." The forest beyond the village stretched wide and endless. He could go anywhere, start fresh, forget everything. Forget her. But could he? News spread quickly through the palace. An important suitor had arrived. His name was Udoka, a wealthy trader from a distant kingdom. He came dressed in the finest woven fabrics, his fingers adorned with gold rings. His caravan carried rare spices, exotic oils, and baskets overflowing with ivory. When he met the king, he did not waste time with small talk. "I have heard of your daughter's beauty," Udoka said, his voice confident. "She is a woman fit to be my wife." The king smiled, pleased. That evening, Udoka was presented before Olamma. She studied him carefully. His rich attire, his strong features, the power in his voice. He was nothing like Obinna. He was a man of status. A man who could offer her a life of luxury. A life she had never dared to dream of before. The question hung in the air like a whisper carried by the wind. Would she say yes? Olamma did not answer right away. Instead, she let Udoka's gifts fill her chamber. Golden bracelets, beaded necklaces, the finest perfumes. She touched them, held them against her skin, and imagined a future far away from the small life she had once known. Her heart did not race the way it had when she was with Obinna. But did that even matter anymore? The kingdom watched. The king waited. And deep in the shadows, Obinna clenched his fists. Olamma hesitated, but not for long. Obinna sat alone beneath the ancient iroko tree, his spear resting across his lap. The night was quiet, yet the silence inside him was louder than the rustling leaves. Olamma was gone, not in body but in spirit. She had slipped away from him like water through his fingers, leaving behind only memories of a girl who once clung to his every word. He should have known. She was never meant for a hunter's life. But knowing didn't make the pain any less real. The moonlight cast long shadows across the earth, stretching toward the path that led to the palace. the path she had chosen. And for the first time, Obinna wondered if love alone had ever been enough. The whispers began softly at first, then grew into laughter. Poor hunter, he thought a princess would marry him. He wanted to compete with great men. Foolish boy. Did you see his face when Udoka arrived? Like a lost puppy. Obinna did not react. He carried on with his hunting, his crafting, his daily life. But inside, their words stung like 1,000 wasp stings. Men he once called friends now smirked when he passed. Women who had admired his strength now saw him as nothing more than a failed suitor. Even the children sang songs about the hunter whose love had been stolen by gold. But what hurt him most was that Olamma never once looked back. Olamma basked in the warmth of admiration. Her days were filled with music, dances, and the scent of rare oils gifted to her by Udoka. She walked through the village adorned in the finest wrappers, her wrists jingling with golden bracelets. Everywhere she went, she was treated like a queen. Young women followed her, eager to copy her style. Men bowed slightly when she passed, hoping for a glance. Udoka was patient, waiting for her final answer. But in the meantime, he showered her with wealth, promising a future where she would never know hunger or hardship. Olamma smiled, believing she had finally stepped into the life she was meant for. Yet, beneath all the admiration and gifts, something felt off. At night, when the celebrations died down and she was alone in her chambers, a strange emptiness crept into her heart. She would touch the golden bangles on her wrists, but they felt colder than they should. She would inhale the rich oils in her hair, but their scent did not comfort her the way she expected. Something was missing. She should be happy. She was happy. Wasn't she? Beyond the realm of men the gods watched. They had seen many rise and fall. Many chase after gold only to find it could not fill their hearts. Many trade love for power, only to yearn for what they lost. They did not speak. They did not interfere. But fate had already set things in motion. The days of endless admiration and gifts began to lose their shine. At first, Olamma barely noticed. She was too caught up in the flattery, the grand promises, and the idea that she had finally escaped the girl she used to be. But as time passed, the thrill faded. She no longer rushed to adorn herself with scented oils or carefully arrange her wrappers. Her meals became hurried, her once glowing skin lost its luster, and the careful self-care that had once defined her transformation slowly fell away. She still had everything, a palace of suitors, wealth beyond what she had ever dreamed of, but something in her heart had begun to shift, and she no longer saw the need to try so hard. It began as a faint, almost unnoticeable scent, a hint of something unpleasant clinging to her skin after a long day. The slightest trace of something musty in the folds of her wrapper. She dismissed it. Perhaps it was the weather or the dust from the village roads. She had no reason to worry. But day after day it grew stronger. The fragrance of the fine oils could no longer mask it. The luxurious baths she took did little to erase it. It clung to her, familiar and unrelenting. She scrubbed harder, layered on perfumes, but deep down, fear curled its cold fingers around her heart. 3 whispers begin again. The first whispers came from the palace servants. Did you notice? It's faint, but it's there. It can't be, can it? Olamma ignored them. When the market women began to exchange glances as she passed, she held her head high. When the laughter of young girls shifted to hushed murmurs, she pretended not to hear. She refused to acknowledge it. She was Olamma, the beauty of the village, the one every man desired. But the whispers followed her, growing louder each day. First, Udoka stayed close. But something in his gaze changed. His hands no longer lingered on hers. The way he spoke became distant, his once passionate words turning into polite conversation. Then he stopped visiting as often. Other men who once fought for her attention found reasons to excuse themselves. The gifts slowed, the admiration faded, and the eager smiles turned to forced pleasantries. One by one they slipped away, until only an empty silence remained where their flattery used to be. Olamma could not accept it. She bathed in scented waters twice as often. She rubbed her skin raw, scrubbing away at something that refused to leave. She locked herself away in her chambers, refusing to let doubt consume her. But no matter what she did, the truth lingered in the air, unmistakable and cruel. She was losing everything. And for the first time, true fear settled deep in her bones. At first, the whispers were cautious, spoken in hushed tones behind covered mouths. "Have you noticed? It's happening again. The gods must be angry." Then, like harmattan wind sweeping through dry leaves, the murmurs spread. The marketplace buzzed with speculation, and elders shook their heads in concern. Some said it was a punishment for her pride. Others believed she had angered the spirits with her selfishness. The once adored Olamma, who had walked through the village like a queen, now found her name tangled in gossip once more. But this time it was not admiration, it was pity. The king, who had once been eager to see her married into wealth and power, now watched her with growing unease. The suitors who had once flooded his palace were nowhere to be found. The promises of grand unions had dissolved like morning mist. His advisers whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with doubt. What will become of her? Who will take her now? The king too began to wonder. Had they all been too quick to celebrate? Had the gods decided to humble the girl who once basked in their blessings? And worst of all, what if no man wanted her now? For the first time in her life, Olamma began to question herself. She stood before her mirror, staring at the reflection that once filled her with pride. The beauty was still there, yet something felt off. The silence of the suitors, the retreat of the admirers, it gnawed at her. Had she been too arrogant? Had she allowed herself to forget the kindness of those who had truly cared? She thought of Odor. His love had been pure, unwavering. He had loved her before the gifts, before the admiration, and she had thrown it away. A hollow feeling settled in her chest. Udoka, the wealthiest of her suitors, had been the last to hold on. For weeks, he had still sent messengers, still spoken her name with affection. But one evening, as she waited for his usual visit, only silence came. The next morning, a servant whispered the truth. Udoka had left. He has chosen another. The words hit harder than she expected. He had been her last chance at securing the life she had dreamed of. And now he too was gone. Olamma walked through the village with her head held high, pretending not to notice the stares, the whispers. But deep inside she knew. She had traded something priceless for fleeting admiration. She had abandoned love for luxury, only to be left with neither. And now, when she looked around, she saw only the emptiness of her choices staring back at her. But fate was not done with her yet. Olamma stood before her mirror, dabbing scented oils onto her skin. She had tried everything, soaking in herbal baths, scrubbing her body with the finest soaps, covering herself in layers of perfume. But no matter what she did, the stench remained. At first, she convinced herself it was just her imagination. But then she saw how people reacted, how they took small steps away from her, how their smiles never quite reached their eyes. It was happening again. Desperation clawed at her chest. She could not let them see her like this. Not again. There was only one person who had ever seen her at her worst and still loved her. Binna. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the small clearing where she knew he often went to hunt. She had avoided this path for so long, too ashamed to face him after pushing him away. When she finally saw him, he was sitting by the river, sharpening his spear. The sight of him, the same Odor, strong and steady, made her throat tighten. "Oh, Binna," she called softly. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Olamma," he said. No warmth, no anger, just her name. For the first time in a long time she felt small. Olamma searched his eyes for something. Hope, longing, anything to tell her he still cared. "I was foolish," she whispered. "I should never have pushed you away." Odor set his spear down, watching her carefully. The Olamma before him was different, not just in appearance but in the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. "Why are you here?" he asked. She hesitated. She wanted to say it was because she missed him, because she had realized he was the only one who had ever truly cared for her. But deep down she also knew the truth. She had come because she had nowhere else to turn. And Obinna, despite everything, saw through her hesitation. "Do you love me, Olamma?" he asked. "Or are you just afraid of being alone?" His words cut deep. Word spread quickly. Olamma had gone to see Obinna. The villagers whispered among themselves, peeking from their doorways, waiting to see what would happen. Some believed it was destiny bringing them back together. Others thought it was only a matter of time before Olamma chose wealth over love again. "Will she truly stay with him?" they asked. Even the king had heard the rumors. He did not approve of the idea, but he said nothing. He was watching just like everyone else. As Olamma stood before Obinna, she realized that this moment would decide everything. If she chose him, she would have to let go of the life she had once dreamed of, the luxury, the riches, the status. If she walked away, she would be alone, but at least she would not have to face the shame of settling for less than what she had once wanted. Obinna waited for her answer. Would she choose love? Or would she chase after wealth once more? Her decision would change everything. Olamma stood before Obinna, her heart pounding. The weight of her past mistakes pressed down on her, but she knew what she had to do. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hands. "Obinna," she whispered, "if you will still have me, I choose you. I choose love, not vanity." Obinna searched her face, looking for deception, but all he saw was sincerity. He exhaled slowly, then pulled her into his arms. The villagers, who had gathered to witness this moment, murmured among themselves. Some shook their heads, doubting her sincerity. Others smiled, believing she had finally learned her lesson. But the gods were still watching. That night, as Olamma lay beneath the vast sky, she prayed. Not for beauty, not for riches, but for forgiveness. "I was blind," she whispered. "I was foolish. If the gods will show me mercy, I will never take love for granted again." A cool breeze swept through the village, carrying with it the scent of rain. And then something changed. For the first time in weeks she felt fresh. She inhaled deeply, and the heavy, sour scent that had clung to her for so long was gone. The gods had heard her. The curse had been lifted, not because she had pleaded for it, but because she had humbled herself. When Obinna saw her the next morning, he noticed it immediately. The change in her scent, the peace in her eyes. "You are free," he murmured. Olamma nodded. "Not just from the curse. From myself." For the first time in a long time she felt light. She was no longer burdened by the need for admiration or riches. She was content. Obinna took her hand and smiled. "Then let us begin again." Under the full moon, with the entire village gathered, Obinna and Olamma were joined as husband and wife. The elders blessed them, and the villagers sang songs of love and second chances. The king himself attended, declaring that their union was proof that true love could overcome anything, even the wrath of the gods. Olamma, once the woman everyone pitied or envied, now stood proud, not because of beauty or wealth, but because she had found something greater: love. As the years passed, the story of Olamma and Obinna became legend. Parents told their children about the woman who had almost lost everything because of pride, and how she had only been saved through humility and love. And so, for generations to come, the villagers would say, "Beauty fades, riches come and go, but a humble heart will always find its way home." Olamma had finally found hers.